Before we begin the next section, I want to take a moment to talk about programming paradigms. First, a quick definition of what a programming paradigm is. It is simply a style of programming or a way of thinking about software construction. So a programming paradigm does not refer to a specific language or set of languages, but it is a way to use a language to build an application, to solve a programming problem. So it is a way of programming that has evolved over time and provides patterns for building software effectively. Some languages are built to facilitate a particular paradigm, but most support one. For example, JavaScript supports at least 3 paradigms: procedural programming, object-oriented programming or OOP, and functional programming. The fact that it supports these paradigms can be attributed to the languages JavaScript took inspiration from when Brendan Eich first developed it. Those languages, Scheme and Java. Now, let me quickly throw out a definition for each of these paradigms. Procedural programming is the type of paradigm mostly used by those getting started in a language. It is a way of programming that uses a linear top-down approach and treats data and procedures or functions as separate things. Procedural programming divides a program into procedures or functions and solves problems by coding how something should be done. Object-oriented programming approaches a programming problem by representing it as a collection of objects. These objects work in tandem to solve a particular problem. Each object is self-sustainable. It contains all the components it needs, data and behaviors. Therefore, it is easier to move an object from one program to another. And finally, functional programming is a paradigm that can be harder to grasp. And that is because it is declarative programming as opposed to imperative. A functional approach is to specify what should happen by applying and composing functions. The program is built of functions that each return a value and provide input into the next function instead of a sequence of imperative statements that change the state of the program like we may be used to. Now, something I need to point out. Just because procedural and functional don't contain the word object doesn't mean they don't use objects. Remember, objects are used throughout JavaScript. A functional approach uses objects. It is more about how they are used. Now, these definitions don't tell you how these different paradigms are used. They simply give you a picture of the approach. The techniques used in both object-oriented programming and functional programming are going to be covered in the next 2 parts. And one final thought. The techniques used by these different paradigms are not mutually exclusive. A good programmer can apply either paradigm to solve a particular problem and may use elements from both paradigms. In fact, React, perhaps my favorite front-end framework, applies elements from both paradigms. So with this discussion of programming paradigms out of the way, let's jump into the next critical part.